Before we start, let's look into some news, shall we?
In terms of GDP, because of this outbreak, could be less than 0.1%. This is on the assumption that I'm looking at 3 months. If it were to be, longer than 3 months, 6 months or 9 months like last time, so it could be more. We may see that 0.1% is a very small impact, but already the economy is growing at the lowest gear. So we are like moving towards the 4%. So anything lower than that, it is, I would say, is not healthy.
Quantifying the impact of COVID-19 on Malaysia's GDP remains quite challenging. This is mainly because the impact comes not only through the steps that the government takes to contain the virus within Malaysia, hence affecting retail, hospitality, so on and so forth, but also due to the evolving nature of the pandemic outside of Malaysia, which then has an impact on travel as well as supply chain. So it is a very convoluted and complex feedback mechanism. Our best guess is that at this moment it looks like the multiple channels could then translate into a 1 to 2 percentage point reduction in Malaysia's growth this year.
Let's get started. So, the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted economic activities around the world, leading to contractions in output and increases in unemployment as many firms were forced to reduce operations or shut down temporarily. In Malaysia, the pandemic period was accompanied by rising unemployment rates and fluctuations in the GDP growth. While existing studies highlight the adverse effects of the pandemic on this economic performance, the combined effect of unemployment and the COVID-19 pandemic on Malaysia's GDP growth remains an issue. So, in this study, we use an econometric model that includes a COVID-19 dummy variable to see the impact of the pandemic on Malaysia's GDP growth. And based on this problem, the objectives are as follows. First is to examine the impact of unemployment and the COVID-19 pandemic on Malaysia's GDP growth. Second is to analyze the relationship between COVID-19 related indicators and unemployment to Malaysia's GDP growth during the pandemic period. Third is to estimate an econometric model that incorporates unemployment and the COVID-19 dummy variable to explain Malaysia's GDP growth. And finally, is to interpret the regression results in order to determine whether unemployment and the COVID-19 pandemic have a statistically significant impact on Malaysia's GDP growth. To better understand this relationship, the next section will briefly discuss the economic theory.
Hi, my name is Nadia and my matrix number is 23071521. From an economic perspective, employment plays a crucial role in determining a country's level of economic output. GDP measures the total value of goods and services produced in an economy. To produce these goods and services, labour is required. When unemployment increases, fewer people are working, which means less production takes place. As a result, total output in the economy declines, leading to a lower GDP. In addition, unemployment individuals earn less or no income, which reduces their spending on goods and services. This fall in consumption further slows down economic growth. Therefore, higher employment is generally associated with lower GDP due to reduced production and lower aggregate demand. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this relationship became even more severe. Government-imposed lockdowns and movement restrictions forced many firms to suspend operation. Businesses reduced their workforce or shut down entirely, causing unemployment to rise sharply. At the same time, uncertainty and health concerns reduce consumer confidence and spending. Even those who remain unemployed tend to save more and spend less. These factors combine to reduce both production and consumption, resulting in a significant decline in GDP during the pandemic period. To examine the relationship between unemployment and economic growth during the COVID-19 period, a simple econometric regression model is used. In this model, GDP is treated as the dependent variable, while the unemployment rate and a COVID-19 dummy variable are included as the main explanatory factors. The unemployment rate captures labor market conditions, while the COVID-19 dummy variable captures the impact of the pandemic period on the economy. The purpose of this model is not to focus on technical details, but to understand how changes in unemployment and the presence of COVID-19 pandemic are associated with changes in GDP. By including both variables in one model, we are able to observe their combined influence on economic performance. Overall, this model provides a simple framework to assess the economic impact on unemployment and the COVID-19 pandemic on GDP. The empirical results and further discussion will be presented in the following section.
Hi, my name is Sophia. My matrix number is 2406647 and I will be talking about the data that is used for this study. So this study uses annual time series data for Malaysia covering the period from 2015 to 2024. We mainly focus on the GDP growth and unemployment as these variables capture overall economic performance and labor market conditions. This period also includes both pre-pandemic years as well as the COVID-19 period, which allows us to observe how the economy behaved during major global shocks. So all the data used in this study are obtained by the World Bank Open Data, specifically the World Development Indicators. So the World Bank is a widely recognized institution and its data is commonly used in umbrella economic research due to its reliability and consistency across time. This graph also shows Malaysia's GDP growth trend from 2015 to 2024. We can observe relatively stable growth from before 2020, followed by a sharp decline during the COVID-19 period, which reflects the impact of lockdowns as well as reduced economic activity. So after this period, GDP growth shows to recover, although the pace might differ across years. So next is the descriptive statistics, which was generated using EIA2013 to summarize the main characteristics of the data before proceeding to econometric analysis. So for the mean, it shows the average GDP growth and unemployment rate over the period, giving an overall picture of economic performance. So for median, it represents the middle value as well as it helps to indicate whether extreme events such as the COVID-19 period affects the data. Lastly is the mode. It reflects the most frequently occurring values, which highlights common economic conditions during the sample period. And additionally, the minimum and maximum values captures the lowest and higher observations, which helps us to understand the range and variability of the data. So with the data clearly described and summarized, we can now move on to the econometric analysis.
Hi everyone, I am Nisa and I will be explaining the estimated econometric model used in our study on Malaysia GDP growth. The model is specified GDP growth equal a constant term, COVID dummy variables, the unemployment rate and error terms. In this model, GDP represents Malaysia annual GDP growth rate. The dummy variable captures the impact of the COVID-19 period in Malaysia, where it takes the value of 1 during COVID year and 0 otherwise. Unemployment refers to Malaysia unemployment rate measured in percentage. This model allows us to analyze how unemployment and the COVID shock affected Malaysia economic growth over time. Next, this slide shows the regression result for Malaysia, estimated using the ordinal least square method. This sample period covers 2015 to 2024 with a total of 10 observations. The coefficient for the COVID dummy variable is -9, which indicates that Malaysia GDP growth declined significantly during the COVID-19 period. This reflects that several economic impact of lockdown, movement control order, and disruption to trade and tourism. The unemployment coefficient is at positive approximately 2.46 during the increases in unemployment associated with higher GDP growth. However, this relationship is not statistically significant as indicated by the p-value. The R-square value is 0.56, meaning that about 56% of the variation in Malaysia GDP growth is explained by unemployment and the COVID dummy. The F statistic probably is around 0.055, indicate that the model is marginally significant at the 10% level. Overall, the result suggests that COVID-19 has a stronger impact on Malaysia GDP growth than unemployment during the study period. Then, from this slide, we can see the actual fitted and residual value of Malaysia GDP growth. The fitted value generally follow the trend of the actual GDP growth, indicate that the model performed reasonably well. However, there are noticeable differences during 2020 and 2021, which are the peak COVID year in Malaysia. The residual plot show that the error fluctuates around zero, suggesting no serious systematic bias. The larger residual during the COVID period indicate that Malaysia's economic contraction was influenced by additional factors such as government restriction, global supply chain disruption, and the reduced domestic consumption, which are not fully captured by the unemployment alone. This slide shows the trend of GDP growth over time from 2015 to 2024. For 2015 to 2019, GDP growth remained relatively stable, fluctuating around 4 to 6%, indicate steady economic performance during this period. However, in 2020, we observed a sharp decline where GDP growth turned negative. This significant drop reflects the economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted production, consumption, and overall economic activity. Following this downturn, GDP growth rebounded strongly in 2021 and peaked in 2022, showing a strong recovery phase as economic activity resumed and policy took effect. Although growth moderated slightly in 2023, it increased again in 2024, suggesting that the economy is gradually stabilizing and returning to a more sustainable growth path. Next, I will pass to the next presenter.
Hi everyone, my name is Chaika Singh and my metric number is 24066905. I will present the discussion of result. In result, the COVID dummy variable has a negative coefficient, which indicates that GDP growth was lower during the COVID-19 period compared to the year before the pandemic. So we can refer back the GDP growth over time graph. So we can see here have a sharp decline in 2020. This finding reflects the significant economic disruption caused by COVID-19, including lockdown measures, business closure, travel restriction, and reduced consumer spending. As economic activity slowed down, overall production and output declined, leading to a lower GDP growth. So this result shows that pandemic can negatively affect economic performance. Next, we consider the role of unemployment in the model. Unemployment is included as a control variable to capture labor market conditions and their relationship with economic growth. The result suggests that unemployment is associated with the change in GDP growth, highlighting the close link between employment level and overall economic activity. When unemployment increases, fewer people are working and earning, which can reduce consumption and production. This in turn affects our GDP growth. Therefore, labor market conditions play an important role in explaining economic performance, especially during the period of economic uncertainty such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Overall, these findings support our study objective and are consistent with economic theory, showing that COVID-19 and unemployment are closely linked to economic growth. So, this is our end of discussion. Thank you.